And welcome to the new episode of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Sweyn Hunter will guide you through the world of online communications. And today we have a special guest joining us, Clare White. So as usual fashion, we start with how the weather is where we each are. So Sweyn, how's the weather where you are?
It's another wet, grey, miserable day, although it is, once again, calm. Every Monday, you ask me how the weather is, and people expect the Northern Isles to be windy and stormy, but every Monday, it's calm. So we'll do more of these.
It's good to hear. And Clare, where are you and how's the weather where you are?
I'm in the fringes of Stoke-on-Trent, and it's very, very grey, quite dark, just grey.
That's a pity. Well, we'll be back to you in a few minutes to hear more about your antics and up to doings and stories of John Popham, we hope. And in Birmingham, it has been sunny. I went out for a lovely walk this morning and saw the sun breaking through the clouds, which was really nice to hear. So we've got our walk around the park and a bit of sunshine. So we've got our vitamin D, hopefully, for the day, which is great. So we are celebrating various things this week and this month, including it's still Black History Month and there's still great, or Black Future Month, as some people are calling it now, which sounds very positive. It's good to hear people celebrating and the ongoing celebrations of that. But we also have something that's called seed gathering season, and this actually started in September, 22nd of September, and it finishes on the 22nd of October, so that's this week. And it's called Seed Gathering Season, and this has been going on since 1998, when the Tree Council has been organising Seed Gathering Season, an autumn campaign to inspire everyone to gather seeds, fruits and nuts and grow the trees of the future. And I don't know about you guys, but I did spend the weekend trying to gather some seeds from plants I had planted during the beginning of lockdown. And I don't know if they're seeds or not, but they come off the top of the flowers, and I'll scatter them next year sometime and see what happens. I don't know if either of you are plant or seed gatherers in your where you live. Either of you?
I have loads and loads of seeds and then never get round to planting them, and then wonder if they're still alive, and then confuse them with the weeds. I'm a really poor gardener.
Well, I was really delighted this year when I planted some lavender seeds that I got my mum about 6 years ago when we were on holidays in Jersey, and they grew. So they can grow again. Sweyn, what about you? Anything?
Well, we're always about 6 weeks behind the standard planting times here, or in the spring, and 6 weeks early, everything stops growing. So it's a very short season. I have in the past tried to plant seeds, but with no great success, I have to confess.
Well, we'll keep trying and encouraging other people to gather seeds and plant them or share them with other people. Also in October is Family Learning Festival. And this started 2 days ago, 17th of October, and goes on till the 1st of November. And this inspires the love of learning and family life, and is the biggest festival celebrating and valuing learning as a family, coordinated by the Campaign for Learning. Marks and inspires the love of learning and family life, and organisations of all types and sizes, from schools and children's centres to libraries to museums and galleries. This was in the past, pre-COVID. Maybe they're doing different things now, but they put on brilliant and creative events and showcase ideas and learning opportunities that families can do afterwards. And I'm sure, Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery has reopened recently, and there are other galleries and things around the Midlands opening. The Hippodrome has who is it? Hockney? I can't remember. But some big exhibition at the Hippodrome Birmingham as well. So some great things happening, and I'm sure great things happening where you both are around family learning. And in fact, a lot of what Clare's work is around learning. So we look forward to hear more about that shortly. And finally, last but not least, 19th to 25th of October is Get Online Week, which is very apposite for this programme. This started in 2007 to bring digital inclusion to national attention in the UK, giving everyone the chance to find the help they need to improve their digital skills. And last year, in 2019, the campaign in the UK reached more than 56,000 people at 4,000 events. Wow. Obviously, with the pandemic, organisations won't be holding large events in local communities, inviting lots of people into public venues, but hope that people are helping people safely, whether it's over the phone, using digital tools like video calls, or in person on one-to-one basis, but only when and where it's safe to do so. So it was great to hear there was so many events last year. 56,000 people helped. Sounds like a very decent number. And I think without further ado, we will introduce our special guest for today, Clare White. Clare is the Area Education Manager and West Midlands Digital Coordinator for the Workers' Educational Association. I don't know if you use that term anymore, Clare, WEA?
Generally the WEA, but we spell it out if people want to know about our long history.
So according to Clare's profile on LinkedIn, which is where we get all our information about our guests, well, some of them anyway, Clare is a creative, experienced manager with a passion for connecting communities and reducing barriers for people, and is currently developing a new program of flexible blended learning modules that address skills barriers informed by behavioural research, contributing to the ambitious business development targets of the WEA nationally and in the West Midlands, and undertaking an MBA in educational leadership at Anglia Ruskin. Wow, you're busy, Clare.
That's why no one hears from me at the moment.
So tell us a bit about yourself and your links with John Popham, obviously, who was the originator of this show, and let's get started.
Okay, that's a good place to start. So I suppose I'll start with the current. I've been involved in the sort of digital inclusion world for feels like over a decade. So you start feeling like you're sounding old, don't you, when you go down this route? But that really lovely community that sprang up when, and it probably was around Twitter, wasn't it? But that community that started just messing and playing and thinking about what could be done, and we all, lots of us, found each other. My sort of career background was journalism, and I hit the point that when I graduated, when there was no jobs in journalism, unfortunately I landed a job with the Quakers, which kind of, luckily sort of supported me living in London, but took me off on a slightly different trajectory. So having done that, all the work experience and everything else, the Quakers had that impact on me that made me realise that I wasn't going to start going back into the death knock and the tabloid press and everything else, and that I really enjoyed the charitable work that, I was fascinated by the stuff that I learned that the Quakers were doing. I'd been brought up a Quaker, but wasn't a practicing Quaker, but really got interested in the practices and the work practices. And from that, I was doing some work in Rwanda with people around the world who were interested in basically redevelopment after genocide. It's a very long route here, but I was part of a kind of youth movement, and off the back of that youth movement I started to realise that actually we've got lots of the same issues in our own backyards, around people feeling voiceless and people feeling disconnected and disenfranchised, because I'd moved from London to Stoke-on-Trent for cost reasons, really. And so I started to kind of link into this community in Stoke, which led to me starting a newspaper in Stoke, because everybody said, oh, well, what we need is a newspaper. So I spent about 18 months just before the economic crash trying to make a newspaper work. And at some point in that journey, I met Will Perrin, who rather more cleverly than I had gone, well, maybe newspapers aren't the future. Maybe we should just train people to start WordPress sites. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea. So having really tried to make this work, I then, I think that's what brought me into digital inclusion. And then I think you're both involved in this world, this world of just turning up to lots and lots of random places for random unconferences. And John was always there filming them. So I got to know John just as the guy at the back of the room who was always there, and we ended up on loads of trains together, and just kind of that trust and relationships that built, because we were all kind of from the same ethos, and we all had this burning passion to get people online. And a little way down the line of that, started working for the WEA, and just became the person in the WEA who started going, oh, why don't we use Twitter? Has anyone thought about doing this? And
you say, Claire, that you met John at the back of various rooms. I actually met him down the line, as it were, because I was one of the ones who was always attending things courtesy of his live streaming. So I'd be the one saying, oh, can't quite hear the guy at the back, can't quite, and he'd be going, I'm doing my best. Do you know what the Wi-Fi I've got to
room then?
Do you know what the Wi-Fi is like here? It's terrible, blah blah blah. So I was on the quality control at the other end. I never actually met John apart from like that. So there we are. But I did feel very close to him.
That's why we've not met. Yeah,
probably yes.
But yeah, and so it was just. I mean, and I was just saying that nice, lovely thing on Friday for the funeral, where it was almost like everybody bumping into each other again, but on Twitter, and all these names of people sharing lovely stories and experiences. And I suppose, I mean, and this is where I do sort of feel that point of regret, because you just think, oh, I meant to do that. I meant to contact John and say I'd love to be on this show, and you just think, oh, it's really, really tragic when we lose someone from our communities, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, but I'm so happy to. I mean, and he said this in a video, didn't he? This thing about why I made that comment. Why has everyone said what an inspiration I've been now?
Yeah.
And but at least he had that opportunity where he must have known the amount of love and warmth that went his way, and his family know that now, which is wonderful.
They do. Yeah.
He was quite frustrated that the lockdown occurred, and which kicked off a lot of things that he'd been working on in a very pioneer kind of way, and unfortunately he wasn't quite able to do what he would have wanted to do.
But he saw that spark, and this has been the incredible thing about these last few months, that people who never thought they'd be able to do anything online are online now. It wasn't, all of us who've been sort of, battering away at this, knowing that there must be some trigger, but it's almost like people kind of haven't quite had that trigger. We've made, I mean, when I talk more about what I'm doing in the day job, I'll say it's still an awfully long way to go, but there are people who are now Zoom pros who hadn't touched any of this before, and they're doing it. And we always knew, I mean, that was back in 2008, wasn't it? John was live streaming stuff and this was, it's still seen as innovative now. And we're all going, oh, but we've been doing this for years. Oh, yes,
I'm very guilty of that. As a veteran of online attendance of 25 years, it's not that new, just get on with it, I'll say. It's not
I still go to meetings and people are saying digital is the future, and I'm going, no, it's behind us, it's around us, it's everything now,
really.
And I think one of my big points of learning, and I've been learning this over the years, and I guess I've started to become a bit better at it, but this last 6 months was a wake-up call with it, was us selling it to people isn't what works. We have to be quiet and wait for someone to sell it to us and say, oh, have you tried this? And you go, that's a good idea. Yes. And that's what works. And
yes, absolutely.
But it's not, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to us, because it was always about power, wasn't it? It's always about, it doesn't work until it's people's ideas. Just imposing solutions on communities doesn't work.
People don't want to be digitally included. They want to be able to do something specific that they want to do. And if the answer is putting some effort into working out how to get broadband or how to work a device or whatever, then that it's not for its own sake. It's to help them in each of us in our life. And particularly, I blather on about this 25-year attending online stuff. That's only because the plane fares to everywhere are too expensive and to do it any other way. I mean, I would not have done it if I'd lived in Perth.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about your current work, Clare, and go back and forth if you like. It's fine.
Yeah, so I've been with the WEA now for 12 years, I think. I started working with them on a health and fitness project. So again, the next part of the story was that, having done lots around, I suppose, communications, extensions to journalism, training people up to use digital tools, have their own voice, the next step for that, and it is an obvious step that I was aware of, is that if people aren't mobile, if people don't have their health, and I suppose although I had a good understanding of inequalities from digital point of view, from got through to education from that route, really going, well, okay, so we can get people online, we can get people to have a voice, then you get to the skills, and then you just have to keep unpeeling the layers. And if you don't get into education, then nobody has any power. So for us, and for those people who there'll be lots who haven't heard of the WEA, we're an educational charity, and our starting point has always been equality. And I tell this story quite often, but when I started with the WEA, kind of with the perspective of, oh, well, learning is to get a better paid job or to get a degree. And we had our sort of initial induction sessions, and I said, was that why people in 1908 wanted to learn? And I had a really, really quick, clear answer back that said, no, it wasn't for that. It was so they could sit around the table with their managers, with the bosses as equals. It came from, the WEA sprang from the kind of cooperative movement on one side and the trade union movement on another, and sort of brought the two together. So some of the Christian socialist side, a lot of the kind of thing that, in the 19th century had come through to like the mechanics institutes and all that world, came together to be about people recognising for themselves their right to learn. So in Stoke-on-Trent and Rochdale, that started in 1908, where basically a committee of people wrote to Oxford University, said, we're not coming to you, you need to come to us. And a professor called R.H. Tawney started going out, and this is a bit like what we used to do with all the unconferences. R.H. Tawney used to go from Oxford to Stoke-on to the Potteries to Rochdale every week and did these tutorial classes. And it was, you might have been a miner or a clerk or a pot bank worker, you were all together in the room as a group, but it was the same quality, the same as the seminar groups that people would have experienced in Oxford. And a really nice story from those early days is that as they got up and running and they started saying, oh, you're talented, we're going to offer you a scholarship. And I think it was, I'm going to take credit for the Longton branch for this one, but it could have been Rochdale, wrote back to Oxford and said, no, we don't want your scholarship. You either do it for all of us or none of us. And the only compromise they eventually came to was that one of the students would go to Oxford, would get the degree, but they'd have to come back and teach all the other groups. And what you got was these core groups, and they sent pioneers out. So when you got as far as 1919, just after the war, there's a map of North Staffordshire, and these pioneering students had gone out to every pit village in North Staffordshire and set up these classes from their own knowledge, and they were rigorous. So you might have been in a coal mine every week, but you'd still write an essay every week. So that, once I was picking up that, I was like, this is where I belong. And so coming back 100 years now into the future, we're a real mix of an organisation. So we have union learners, we have community learners, we have people doing exams, people learning for leisure. We go right up to, I think, students in their 90s. We've had students who've gone well past 100, who've been learning with us for decades, and we do the whole range, which makes us really hard to pin down, and we're always trying to simplify ourselves. So what do the WEA do? And I've just spent 10 minutes explaining. We are trying to simplify it and try and make ourselves, I think you just shared the website, didn't you? So
I did.
We try and make it simple. We try and, get people on just as a starting point, but we really try and kind of like people become members, and it is a membership organisation, and people end up learning with us for years. And we are a lifelong learning organisation, but we fit in with the rest of the learning landscape. So, we might not do higher level qualifications, but we might help people to get there. We do loads of really interesting, obscure subjects now. And obviously, this was almost all face-to-face. So that project I referred to on LinkedIn was a project we were funded, which was like the starting point of our blended learning. We were able to develop Canvas platform, which quite a few universities use and FE colleges use, and we've adapted it for ourselves because we work with people who perhaps have no English to start with, and obviously with the digital exclusion thing, we have to have really easy pathways in. So we've been doing that for about 2.5, 3 years, but it was a really small part of our programme. And then lockdown came, and we were continuing face-to-face learning up until the middle of March. And then we had the announcement, and within 3 days we had to close down everything we were doing, which was horrendous. Just got to answer the door.
Okay. We'll
Okay.
talk among ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. You mute yourself, we'll be back. Okay, great. Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? And
It's
all
great,
the
isn't it?
stories of John, you know, and what he did standing at the back of the room. You could just see him, can't you?
Absolutely. Well, I
Yeah.
couldn't see him. I could see the picture who's screaming out. But yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I was just
Did
going to
you-
share this
Yeah, go on.
website again because I think that's maybe part of what Claire was
Okay,
talking about.
yes.
This Digital Lifeline project thing.
Yeah,
Let's have a
yeah.
quick look at that.
She's back. Right.
So yeah, in March we closed down everything, and then we were really fortunate, and we were able to basically, instead of just doing nothing for 6 months and furloughing everybody, we were supported by our core funders to basically say, see if you can do something with your students, so everybody, hundreds of our tutors were trained during that period. They've learnt to deliver through Zoom. They've learnt to use our learning platform. So what we've got now is that people can learn with us. It's social. We're really proud of the fact that it's very interactive, and we maintain the feel of the seminar group, and that people aren't just sort of what's the word? Online learning gets a bit of a bad reputation, doesn't it, for just being static pages, but we make it interactive, and people make friends on groups. You know, we pair people up, we use breakout rooms, we have little small group activities. People can get to know each other through the discussion threads, and we've been really, we have been really successful. I'm really conscious that we have a huge number of students that haven't been able to return, but for those that have, and I feel fairly sure that anybody with Wi-Fi can learn with us. They can learn on any device. The Wi-Fi is the killer. If they haven't got Wi-Fi, then they can't prepay to learn. It's
the data element. We're always going on these days about the three, at least there's maybe a fourth one I've forgotten. That'd be ironic. The three things you need is the device, the data, and the skills.
Exactly.
And I suppose the fourth one is the motivation and the actual real world stuff to do using those other three.
Yeah.
But yes, the data so far has been really tricky to work out what to do about that.
Yeah.
Because there are so many factors, and again, this is something that John over many years was absolutely committed to. Remember his I can't remember what he called it, is Not Connected Week or something, where he went around the north of England to all sorts of places and just spoke to people and recorded them talking about how they couldn't do their homework because they didn't have adequate broadband. And I think the data side finally is being included in some of these schemes. I mean, a lot of these schemes over the years have been, dump a pile of devices in the community and run away.
Yeah.
Then they would evolve to being dump a load of devices and be there for a while people try to use them despite not having any broadband, and then run away. But now finally, with things like Connecting Scotland and Device.now and the Welsh equivalent, the data element is also included in it, and it's absolutely crucial. Particularly,
especially with people at home now. So
that's right, because you can't assume that people will go to a library or anything like that. They've got to be able to do it from somewhere they are on their own at, which typically will be their home. And it's a huge change in thinking and a huge challenge, because it just brings right up to the forefront all the issues of the inequities of different types of broadband access, and even 4G access, 3 or 4G access as well, because I think we're at the stage that for most things either broadband wired or 4G will do. But there are still a tremendous number of places, little tiny pockets in the most surprising places, even in cities, which don't have a signal.
Yeah, and it's so connected to disadvantage. So again, I mean, to some extent, the rural thing has been overcome. We've got a branch over in Herefordshire where, and we have meetings with them now on Zoom. And a few years ago, they couldn't do anything. But those people that can afford it have stable Wi-Fi in a lot more parts of the country now. But if you haven't got Wi-Fi now, there's almost no support organisation in the world that can give you a Wi-Fi contract. And so, and it's like electricity, isn't it? If you have to prepay, it's more expensive, and that's the really frustrating thing at the moment, because as I say, we've come so far with tech support and volunteers working together, and you know, they all sort of like the equivalent of the social media surgery type things, where, you know, if we can get you on video, we can help you through this. We can even get around not being in the same space as you, and we could do quite a lot with phone calls. But if you don't have the Wi-Fi, it's so short term. We might get lucky and land a Wi-Fi dongle for a couple of months and you can get on, but that's not it's not going to help you for long. And the isolation that people are experiencing, so some of the groups that we usually meet face to face, we know just haven't been able to see or speak to anybody, and it's real. That's really, really tough to live with, because it's not changing fast enough, is it?
No, it's both access physically and also being able to pay for it. There's the two very distinct sets of factors there.
Well, we have been talking on this show previously about data poverty, and in fact, I was just talking to somebody this morning about it related to a story that we covered a few weeks ago called a Citizen Sim, where trying to encourage people who have data to share it with those who don't. And so this guy is trying to, Paul Russell, his name is trying to talk to others who are interested in this. So we're going to have Paul on the show possibly next week to talk about his ideas, and he's from the Midlands, so that's really a really nice connection to have. But it's kind of getting the the heft, getting the push that makes it possible for a large group of people. The problem
we're facing now is that it's not exciting for any of the industry to be doing this work. What they want to focus on is expanding 5G to more places, and the old business of basic, even 2G coverage, 3G, 4G coverage. It's about 3.5G that's absolutely required. 3G is not quite enough, but 4G can be overkill. But it's just not. It's not seen as something that's exciting or important. It's just kind of, oh well, we have to do a bit of that as well. And the whole industry really needs to focus on it. Hopefully, projects like Citizen Sim might allow them to at least make it visible as a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to put some weight behind it. Go on, Claire.
Well, because that's where the real intervention is needed. The rest, it goes back to what we were saying about, how people get online. The rest doesn't need intervention. It needs these webs of people helping each other. We, to some extent, the voluntary sector and all the other sectors that are interested in this can do the rest. But, if we don't have the pipes and we don't have equitable access, it's not just that. I'll mention as well, another element that's really affecting learning is that we've almost gone backwards, in the sense that now, obviously, we're thinking of home as a safe space to learn. And to some extent, in terms of the virus, it's the safest space to learn. But you have a whole load of factors that we've not really had to think about quite so much, although they've still been there. We've gone back to the age where a controlling family member can affect your access to a device, or where if you don't have a private space, you can't learn if you're embarrassed because your kids are running around, or and as I say, lots of our students are breaking through this. It's wonderful. I sit in and help with some of the classes, like in ESOL class, where everyone's working so hard together, and they're fabulous, and there's kids jumping all over the sofas, and everybody's, but they're focused and they're concentrated. Now that's family support for people to learn, and that's just as crucial as the Wi-Fi. And so we're desperate to get some sense of like access hubs or some places that people can go to learn again, because again, I mean, even a library, doesn't necessarily help if you're in a big library. You can't be on a Zoom. So we need private spaces where people can go to now to be able to access learning. We do need that as well. But as I say, a lot of the rest we can do. We need to work with lots of other organisations, because that whole pathway towards learning on video is a really, really long and hard pathway. But between our sector, we can do that, but we need investment in buildings and broadband.
Definitely. I was going to go back.
Go ahead.
I was going to go back, Clare, to some of the early days again, because I think it's good for people to be reminded of kind of how far we've come, really, and the kind of things that were became possible because we were working in the open, because people shared things on Twitter and on other platforms that were had previously been siloed. And I'm sure you can, I'm sure you can think of examples where, previously conversation, it's how it's having access to people, isn't it? Nowadays we take it for granted that you can have a conversation with almost anybody you like. 60 degrees of separation doesn't apply anymore. 2 or 3, we can always reach anybody we want to, really.
I think another positive around that, going back to this thing about relationships, and I saw when you did the report last week from Dan Slee's stuff about Twitter, and although Twitter is not quite the community outreach place for relationships between people, so like you can talk to public health professionals and scientists, and you can actually learn to trust people. And that was a really strong part of that movement, because actually it was funny, I used to come along to all the local gov and UK gov camps and all that, really because they were the most fun places to be. But I was always a bit conscious I wasn't one of those, but I did make all these relationships. And the council comms camp type world, you suddenly had a relationship with like a PR person from the council. And in most of our local areas, normally the relationships between, let's say, back in my days of like, a journalist versus a council, it was always daggers drawn, wasn't it? And so that thing about actually built some trust, and the local health team realised that it's not just them who can fix the public health problem, it's also working with all these community groups. That just works naturally on Twitter and LinkedIn very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a camp tomorrow, actually. Seth and Sweyn are involved in VCSS camp, which is for infrastructure organisations. Yeah, so we haven't had one for 2 years, so it'll be good to kind of revisit. Some kind of people have been before, but lots of people have never been before, so it'll be great to kind of
have you sat in
again.
on have you done an unconference online yet? I haven't had a chance yet.
Yes, oh yes.
And it works?
Absolutely works. Two that I can think of immediately were Comms Camp Stays Home, which was all those PR people you were talking about, led by Dan Slee and others. And the other one last week was Local Gov Camp.
How was that last week?
And that was amazing.
I suppose it's really better for you, because you were always the person on the camera.
This is what I've always wanted. This is how I've always wanted.
Everyone's coming to you now.
Just having this conversation.
It's called Sweyn Camp.
I'm very keen to help with as many as possible to diffuse the skills in doing the online bit as far out as possible, even to those who don't think they need them. And I'm also quite conscious of at every single event. I mean, there's been others as well than those two. But at every event, you find all sorts of people who haven't been able to travel in person to that room in wherever the room has been. Even if it was wheelchair accessible, there are other reasons of a disability that you can't necessarily travel. There's all sorts of caring responsibilities and all sorts of other issues which mean that you can't necessarily travel. Now, obviously, the people who don't have the private space at home, there's other issues as well. There's downsides, definitely. But if you
more inclusive, isn't it?
If you do a kind of, there's different challenges to work on, and I think there probably are fewer challenges to work on if something can be hybrid or online. The great test, as we say nearly every week, this must get really boring for everybody who watches every week. The great test will be how to introduce into this conversation or into the comms camp that we had, introduce the room that's got 2 to 100 people in it, as well as the people who are attending like this. Because while everybody's got their little box on the screen and you're all equal, there's a lot of work to be done in events management to work out how to do various types of event as a hybrid event, if that's even possible for some. So I think some events will have to choose between being in person and being online. But I think with a bit of effort, quite a lot should be able to be made hybrid to some degree of satisfaction or other. And it's you're never trying to replicate every aspect of being there if you're doing something online. You're just trying to make something good enough to make the effort required to connect enough. And so that the learning that you can get out of it, or the participation that you can get out of it, is good enough. It doesn't have to be precisely equal to everybody who's there. You know, as long as it's kind of clear how it's all going to work, then I think there's a big spectrum of possibility. It'll just remain to see whether event organizers want to move in that direction, or whether they just retreat to their comfort zones and their proven commercial models and all of that stuff. It'll be very interesting to see whether or not it's true we can never go back. Everything we can never go back. We can never go back.
I can share something.
I think we could backslide quite significantly, given little or no pressure to move on.
But you're right, the experiences that we've got. So one of the things that, because I've been able to get onto quite a few different seminars and things that, again, I wouldn't have probably got to if they're in places. And a lot of people defaulted to that, right? Even to the extent of it's going to be on Zoom, but we're not allowing anyone to, you can't show your faces, and you can just chat to the facilitator, that sort of thing.
It's like
missing the point.
It's like the Cisco GoToWebinar from hell.
Exactly,
Except it's all day now, not just for 90 minutes.
Yes, but some people have managed to have obviously intentionally got beyond that. One little initiative I spotted the other day, and it's so simple and obvious, but I just hadn't quite seen it done like this before, was my university asked everybody if they'd like to sign up to be randomly paired with someone else in the world, because the danger with this sort of thing, even with a small group, you just want to have that one-to-one chat. But I thought that was a lovely thing, because I miss, now that I am here constantly, I miss meeting people from all over the world, and you get that chance. But even if it's in a group of 8, that's not quite the same as getting a chance just to make small talk. So I like that idea of just get everyone to register an interest. You're just going to randomly pair them. You're going to spend an hour having coffee with someone you've never met. And I thought that's great, because that is the sort of thing.
There's also the tool
thousands of miles for.
There's a tool that's being marketed as something, a tool to connect with somebody else, so that you can both focus on a task independently.
Yes. I haven't done a session on that, but I do like the idea.
I like that idea. Yeah. The other good thing that's related to what you were talking about there was that the platform Hopin, which was what Local GovCamp used, it has a feature called networking, where if there's nothing much going on that you're interested, you can go to the networking bit and press a button and be randomly allocated for a 4-minute conversation with somebody else.
That's great.
Civic Square used that for their Festival of Dreams as well in June, and that was really good. It was really nice. And but they used Hopin for the first time I'd seen it, and it was like having the radio on the background. I just played it all day and just kind of dipped in and out of things. And I think if you can give people that experience, they really value it. My worry, like we were saying about people going back, is that people aren't learning a lot of this digital stuff, tools, whatever, on top of feeling frightened and upset and worried about their future and their family and all that. So it's not a great basis, is it, for building the digital infrastructure, the
especially if you're in some kind of abusive situation, or you're sharing a house with 6 others or whatever.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. So it's something we have to think about. Shall we go to some of the stories that we
yes, I wonder if I can
lined up
find
and see
any
if
of
we
them
can
to share.
see if I can. We won't do them all, I think, but just some of the ones I thought I'd quite
Get
something
Online
to
week.
say.
The Great Digital Divide. Will that be the next one?
The Capgemini one, yeah.
Yes.
So this was it's just kind of an infographic that I spotted about from the Capgemini Research Institute. Now that why bringing the digitally excluded online should be a global priority. So there's good figures about 56% of younger offline people aged 22 to 36, 47% living in rural areas, There's a perceived lack of interest, they said, stemming from fear or lack of confidence or experience in using the internet is a key reason for 65% of offline respondents aged 60 plus and 54% of offline females. Being offline impacts all aspects of life, leads to social exclusion, limits career mobility, hinders access to public services, creates financial hardship and health inequalities. And then people can't take advantage of the opportunities that are being offered. As you're scrolling down there to Sweyn, we see more and more of the percentages that matter. 48% of offline people would like to get internet access in the future. And we go down to kind of encouraging policymakers and governments to make devices and the internet more accessible to marginalized communities and create greater accessibility for online public services. And then the very last one, I think it is, focus on public-private partnerships and education, bring awareness to disadvantaged offline populations on the value of the internet. I think we can all agree with those as aims. But they're saying that cost is a key reason for younger offline people, especially in rural areas. So it is something we'd like to address at some stage. So then the next story that picked up was about tackling the digital divide using a community-based approach. And this is about full fiber, the reason for the case for using full fiber being the only viable network technology to deliver multi-gigabit networks in an affordable way. Is that the same story? Yeah, that's right. That's it. So this is about independent ISPs, which I don't know much about really. Let me just get out of this. Sorry.
We know someone who knows all about independent ISPs and fibre, don't we, Pauline?
Do we? Oh, is that Chris Condor?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Chris, if you're listening. Yeah, it's good to see other people writing about it as well and supporting independent ISPs. And the kind of the backup for this is, or the case for this is that independent ISPs contribute to a stronger connectivity ecosystem in three ways: stronger competition, an expanded, more exclusive market, and increased productivity. So, consumers will see competition that will lower prices. And we talked last week about people being able to shop around to get the best price. And they get faster, more reliable broadband. Lower price points expand the market opportunities and bridge the digital divide. So the case is being made that businesses need to build an affordable full fibre network for the wholesale and retail markets that can provide SMEs, low-income neighbourhoods and resellers with a broadband connection that levels the playing field for business, innovation, education and everyday personal use. And I think that's a really strong and well-made argument for independent ISPs. So we must get Chris Condor on to hear more about that. And Clare is joining us again. Clare, how are you again?
Apologies, I'm fine.
No worries.
Working at home and the door keeps going.
You're popular. Yeah, we're just going through some of the stories that we pick up, which we do on the show as well along the way. So we've just covered a few, including independent ISPs. And the next one is something called it's in the US, a Net Inclusion 2020 webinar series. They usually have a conference, but they did a webinar series this year instead because of lockdown. And they still have some seminars coming up to the 4th of November. And it's just interesting to see the list of seminar topics that they're covering, because I think sometimes we need a curriculum for addressing the issues that we have to deal with. So Digital Inclusion 101, I think that sounds like, and if you sign up for these, by the way, I think you can see all the previous videos. So I'd encourage people to do that as I have done. So Digital Inclusion 101, then Research and Data to Convince Locally, then Racial Equity and Digital Inclusion, Local Government Digital Equity Strategies, Research about the effectiveness of digital adoption, new digital inclusion models. It's always good to hear other things that are coming on. Coalitions. I was talking to Paul Russell this morning about who he's got on his team for the Citizen Sim idea, who's convening, and how are strategic decisions being made. Because it's great having a good idea, but if nobody's backing your idea, it's hard to get it through. And then finally, their final plenary is how did the pandemic change digital inclusion work on the ground and in policy? So how would you say that digital inclusion work changed for you in your organization with the lockdown, Claire? What would you say happened, changed?
Lots of very positive change. We'd already been, a lot of us were already working quite remotely with you know, we'd closed down offices, and a number of us were based at home, but and we were already using Teams. So, but what happened was just a massive acceleration of that. So again, within the WEA, there were the little band of early adopters, and we got kind of all pulled in and became the national team that trained up everyone else. And it was a great model, you know, it was kind of a train the trainer approach. And now mostly it's tutors training other tutors to do the delivery. And gradually we're having that same approach. So we're training up our volunteers to convert from being community volunteers, and then we're asking those volunteers to train other volunteers, and we'd love to extend that so that we can train other organisations volunteers as well. So we're involved in some networks and talking about that. So it was very much this, you know, suddenly we can cross collaborate. I mean, it feels like we have every meeting now ends with we need to create teams for that. So we have that proliferation of teams, and we have lots and lots of working groups working on everything, which that's the really exciting side. The difficult side is just how flat out everybody is when, you know, we're a charity with a small core capacity, and as all of you and everybody watching and interested in this topic knows, the support is so high, and just getting every student onto a course now is you know, if they've never used this technology before, even with Wi-Fi, it's very time consuming. So we're juggling so many things, whereas every organisation, so it's very much that sort of feeling that everything keeps changing. And also what's affected us hugely is that it's very difficult to embark on a learning journey with what's going on. So obviously everyone's underlying anxieties affects us massively, but
on the technical side, what you're describing strikes me as quite similar to what the University of the Highlands and Islands has been doing for quite a long time.
Yeah.
They were really pioneering in the approach of blended learning using video right back in the late 90s. Even they were using old Sony ISDN equipment to do multi-site video conferences, and really they've almost stepped back a bit as they've adopted some of the new shiny learning environments, which some people claim aren't really as good as what they were doing before, which they'd kind of made up themselves and run off the back of just what they'd learned. So yeah, a lot of what you're talking about, I mean, I think the student body will be a very different demographic and quite distinct, but the actual issues are very, very similar.
And it's so kind of, I think even before all of this happened, it was so needed that we had this blended model, because there were so many people that couldn't come to a community centre, who couldn't learn at the same time as everyone else. And it's hard to make those changes until you're forced to for some reason.
Absolutely.
So
well, in the UHI's case, it was sheer geography across the area, but they have expanded outwards. They now offer courses to learn from literally wherever you are in the world.
And that's the wonderful side. We had some people coming from different countries and trying the courses, and of course people. I mean, it's interesting because people do like bumping into someone from another part of the country, but we're definitely getting that sense now where people are saying, I miss my group. And actually, and this was something I wanted to mention on this show, because I think it's something people could really work together on, is we started to talk about, well, maybe if the rule of 6 could be used here, let's think about ways that you can extend that learning. So could you pair up and go for a learning walk with somebody? Because I think we've cracked the voluntary sector response of, you know, hopefully we've cracked everyone's getting a food parcel, and they're getting that cup of tea with a befriender or a phone call from a befriender. But, you know, what we're starting to think about now is, you know, what about enriching somebody's life by sitting and let's have a conversation about art history or Raymond Williams. You know, it's not just about survival, is it? It's about people come to these courses because they just want to extend their minds. And so that, and I suppose it goes back to what I was talking about, that old model of actually you're sat learning from an expert. Our tutors are expert in their field, but you can go out and share that with somebody else as well. And maybe that could be something that we take forward in this next phase, where getting together in groups of 15 isn't necessarily coming back. And if it is coming back, it might not be the most comfortable experience.
But you could get together in 3 groups of 4, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And link them appropriately somehow.
And I'd love that. I think that might be part of the answer, because it isn't just the tech, is it? We always know it's not just the tech, it's the social side.
That's right. Well, I mean, even the tech, there are a few companies who've always had all of their workforce distributed across the world. They've got very well developed models of how that works. And quite often it depends on everyone getting their own connection, even if they're sitting at the next desk. You're still in a separate. So that there's all sorts of experience from all of the world and in all sectors that should help us with the very important stuff that you're now talking about. I think that's excellent. I hadn't really thought of that up until now. Is how to make the best of the restrictions and add the technology to that.
I think there's one more aspect to that, if I can add in as well, is one of the things that's big in our minds and most other providers in our world is the massive job losses. And again, people's perception of what they can do is very much based on the confidence that they've built through their normal jobs. But remote working has opened up. We all know this, and we've been part of this world, but huge numbers of people who will just be looking around them at the local job listings, and actually the quality of remote job opportunities has improved recently. And that's a really interesting prospect. But again, it's another learning curve of, well, how does office culture work? How do I make sure I don't get isolated? And I think there's loads of learning in that again needs passing on, because if you're completely isolated and you don't even know how to get your foot in the door in the first place, because once you've got a job, people will equip you and they'll make sure you can work.
That's right.
But people are obviously looking around them at the moment going, well, what can I do next? And that used to be driven by where you were. It doesn't need to be now.
Yeah. So
I saw that basic fact of, workers will be able to apply for a much broader range of opportunities. I saw that used as some advice against some of this fairly draconian employee monitoring software that's starting to come out.
Oh yeah, that's been awful.
Like clock on, clock off software, or always keep your camera on so I can see that you're working.
Yeah.
And the advice that I was reading, I wish I could remember where. I can never remember any of the sources of these half-baked ideas of mine. But anyway, basically saying, well, be careful how you alienate your staff, because if they're any good and you start doing that to them, they've now got a far wider range of opportunities to go and work for somebody who isn't so horrible. Basically.
Yeah, I would hope that we don't copy examples. Well, I mean, I'm sure Fiverr has its place, but there are websites like Fiverr that have kind of exploited people. I'd like to see it more egalitarian, and for people like us, I suppose, to some extent, who have some social conscience, to set up some platforms that will use people's skills and talents and pay them accordingly. And one of the stories I saw during the week, I'm probably not going to have time to cover it today, but was about how people in the global south are losing out. They're some of the most excluded, including from the internet, and so their skills are decreasing, or sort of not as, they're not going to be able to take advantage of the internet as much as everybody else. And so the poverty gap is going to expand there even more, and that'd be a real concern that we would want to address, because most of the stuff that's on the internet is also in English, and that excludes people as well. I was reading some stuff about that, so we want to follow that up in the future.
And I think that's the case in the UK, because you can't even put yourself forward for a job interview if you can't do a video interview.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely something to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, because one of the stories, I have some data here that says, as of 23rd September, a staggering 850 million children and young adults, which is half of those enrolled in schools, colleges and universities worldwide, are not in education or training because of COVID-19. And this was according to UNESCO. The agency is also tracking closures of schools up to secondary level daily. And although schools are reopening in many places, they remain closed in 52 countries. You know, it's really tragic to hear that people are missing out at a time when you'd like to think it was even more. Yeah, that's the story there on the screen now.
I guessed right.
Yeah. It's you know, it's great to have the stories, but it's heartbreaking that that we know that people are being excluded.
And I think that's where we've got to take the conversation next, really, because obviously digital inclusion isn't going away, but also the way we work. So as you know, we're an adult education provider, but I'm not sure we just survived lockdown, didn't we, where it was, and we managed to get our kids through and educated just about, but we didn't really make the most of, well, actually now everyone of every age has to keep learning, and how could we learn together, and what happens if we go into other lockdowns? Do parents have the skills to keep supporting their kids on a temporary basis?
I think digital inclusion becomes less about, well, becomes more than just who's connected and who has the skills. It's all these other things that you've mentioned, Claire, to do with situation at home, opportunities to get together in small groups if we're allowed to, all of these things that they kind of the things that you can be excluded for can kind of slide up the scale of need from the very basic practical technical ones up, and every time you make some progress on one of them, it just opens out another vista of inequality that is resting on that. And it's I think the thing that you've said that struck me most is that, you know, people need to sell this to themselves and then sell it back to us. We all need to find and help people see the motivation behind all this stuff. And I think that's a really important point for some of us in the public sector, like I am, or even in some of the larger private third sector organisations.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. Do we see a cat there?
Yes,
Claire.
She's been knocking at the door as well.
Hang on, if you hold her up again, I'll get a picture. Trying to get some pictures while we're on. And
She's really happy.
Yeah.
So cool. Oh,
Excellent.
Yes, do I have to do this?
I'm sure they're well used to being in pictures. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Well, I think we're more or less running out of time. I've lost my
Right, we are.
mouse
Yeah.
for some reason.
Oops.
It's back again. Yes, that's good. Always something goes wrong about this time. So I think we're more or less running out of time.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Final
Thank you
words.
for having me. That was really
Thanks
good
very much for
fun.
coming on, Claire. And we are hoping to do a kind of a longer tribute show to John at some stage, you know, when the time is right. So we'd love to have you back on again. And in the meantime, if you've got any stories about John that we haven't heard yet, or any photographs, please do post them in the usual places. And if people want to get in touch with the show, Sweyn, what are we saying to them? How to get in touch with the show at the moment?
I would use Twitter and use the Dr. Tech hashtag. I think that's probably the most reliable way at the moment, while we sort out all the various channels and phone numbers that we're not necessarily able to monitor at the moment. Yeah.
So goodbye to Claire. Goodbye, Sweyn.
Goodbye, Pauline.
We're sorry to say goodbye to you last week, John, but we know you're up there in digital heaven, sort of live streaming us and keeping an eye on what we're doing. So thanks very much. So bye, everybody.
Bye.